computer. Let's do that. There we go. Right. In true diabetes buddy fashion, I'm gonna obviously, as we know, advertised this was Wendy's call, but Wendy's having a bit of a hypo, so I will kick things off, and hopefully when Wendy's feeling a little bit better in a few minutes, she can come
I'm
and give us
happy
the
to
actual
say hello
science.
and stuff. Let me just get my, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Yeah.
I was just going to say to everyone, I was just about to have some dinner and my blood glucose was 4. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to treat that as a hypo. I'm just going to eat my dinner. And I've just shared my bloods with Andrew, and I'm 2 point, well, according to that, I'm 2.2. I haven't done a finger prick. So I'm feeling a little bit spaced out. So I just asked Andrew, could you take the reins? And yeah, hopefully I have now treated it, but hopefully I'll kick back in a minute. But yeah, I think I am quite low because I'm feeling completely spaced out. But yeah, well, let's see how we go. So what I'd like to do is some of these nutrition bites calls I've done, like a PowerPoint, and it's been quite structured. I've got some notes, I've got some stuff that I know and I want to run through with you guys. I thought I'd like to get just a bit of conversation going, make it quite sort of interactive. Excuse me if I slur and make a bit of a mess of myself, because yeah, 2.2 feels pretty wrong. But yeah, if we can get the conversation going, I'd like people to share their experiences of what they've done with carb loading, what they understand about carb loading, what they need help with, and then hopefully when I'm back in range, I'll kick in with what I've got to say. So yeah, maybe around the room. There's been lots of chat in the groups. So yeah, kick it off, guys.
Very good. All right, let's I'll kick things off as why not. So what well, from my and as everyone knows, I've got no qualifications in anything related to nutrition or anything like that, like Wendy has. So Wendy is qualified, I am not. However, what I've found over the years, which I'm sure everyone can relate to, is when you don't eat, and this I'm talking around exercise, yeah, and I'm not particularly talking about carb loading, I'm just talking about the amount of carbs that you should eat. Generally, I used to be the same as probably most people, and I didn't eat nowhere near enough as you should do when you're exercising, whether it be a long run or a long bike. And there's a real easy way, in my opinion, to identify without it being science driven or having any fancy sort of metrics is when you get back, and I used to do this all of the time, was if I'd done a long ride, like e.g., 4, 5, 6 hours on the bike, and you get back and you're absolutely ravenous and you just start eating everything like you're having a hypo, but you're not hypo, you haven't eaten enough. That's just a general sort of bit like Wendy was saying the other day with the calorie P. It's not a science tool, but it's very useful and very practical. So that's one thing that I started to try to target because I used to undereat a lot and I'd go, oh yeah, it's good for many things. You might lose loads of weight. Your body might get really efficient at using its energy stores, but if it depends, and I always say to people, which hopefully Wendy would agree, but it depends why you're exercising. If you're exercising to get fitter and faster and stronger, then probably you want to be fueling for that exercise, right? You could argue that if you're not that bothered, then fine, plod around. But what you do is you make it bloody hard for yourself because it's like trying to drive a car that's on the reserve tank. Eventually, it's going to run out of fuel, right? So, from my perspective, it's not science driven. All I do is try to eat enough, have a number in mind that I want to try and eat per hour. Again, it's different for everyone. You hear lots of numbers floating about these days: 60 grams, 90 grams, 120 grams. There isn't really a grams for everyone's got a specific um, amount of carbs that they need per hour. No one will really know unless you get it tested how much you need. But a good, easy way is to know if you're hungry when you get back. So that's my sort of top tip and something that I've learned. So I don't know when anyone else has got something similar. Do you disagree? Do you agree?
So I was going to specifically look at carbohydrate loading, because people talk about carbohydrate loading and there's different different takes on it. So some people will know a certain amount that they're trying to aim for. Some people, the myth, I guess, is that you see people putting a plate up of what they're going to carb load with the night before an event, and they haven't really given a lot of thought as to what that should be, their amounts, what their own body weight is, and how that equates. So I wanted to kind of look at some of the myths, and I was hoping that people in the group might have tried some carb loading, got it wrong, particularly in the context of type 1 diabetes. It is quite difficult, and the reason being is that if you're carb loading in the traditional sense of carb loading, you're actually also going to affect your insulin sensitivity. So say, for example, you're doing a marathon, half marathon, the next day, you decide you're going to carb load, you're going to eat plenty of carbs, like mountains of carbs the night before an event, and you don't realize that actually what's going to happen is you're going to massively need, you're going to massively need a lot of insulin. That's going to then affect your blood glucose. You're taking on lots of insulin. You're going to suddenly drop if you take too much. You're going to stay high if you haven't got enough. Actually working out what you need with the insulin sensitivity and the carb loading can be a challenge. So I was going to go through some steps that are particularly helpful for people with type 1. But I wanted to know your experiences first. What have you done? So if you've got a long event, you're not carb loaded, have you carb loaded, got it wrong? Some people taper, but they don't realize that also with type 1, if you taper too much and you're sat on your bum doing nothing, you're going to become quite insulin resistant, and that's not going to help either. So yeah, just
so what I do sometimes, this may be completely wrong, so I'm sorry, because I struggle with this, as probably most of us around the room do. But I tend to, if I'm going to do 4 or 5 hours on a golf courses might be different from your point of view, but if I'm going to do 4 or 5 hours on a golf course, what I tend to do now is reduce the amount of insulin for a set number of carbs that I take in the morning. So I'm almost operating high on the basis that I'm not going to go low.
So that's not carb loading. That
No,
is
I know it
managing
isn't.
your blood glucose.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
But you could do it. I guess I could do it the other way.
So I think we're slightly on a different page.
Yes.
So what you're talking about is not hypoing during the event. So
Yes.
if we just sort of level the playing field,
Yep.
people without type 1 diabetes, if you're doing something that's for some people 90 minutes, but generally if you're looking at an activity that's strenuous for 2 hours or longer, where you're competing and you want to get results, you don't want to be fatigued, you don't want to lose your pace, you don't want to have heavy legs, you don't reduce concentration, you don't want to hit the wall or bonk, whatever we tend to hit the wall in running and bonk in biking. So if you don't want to experience those, you do need to make sure that your glycogen stores are all replenished, and you need insulin to do that. So reducing your insulin isn't going to allow you to help that. So while you're carb loading, you often need more insulin.
Okay.
So carbohydrate loading, so some people call it glycogen loading, some people historically have called it for compensation. But basically what you need to do is make sure that you're replenishing any stores that you've reduced in your previous training, and making sure that you've got a good store ready to go into an event. So just to give you a little bit of background, your muscles and liver, they store carbohydrate as glycogen, and that's the ready available fuel that you push back into the bloodstream to use when you've used the glucose that's in your blood. And the store, so typically in muscle, depends on your body size and how muscular you are, of course. So muscle glycogen, about 300 to 600 grams, depending on your body weight, and the liver between 100 and 120. So, for an average person, you're looking, say, 500 grams of one, 100 of the other. So the liver, the glycogen that's in your liver, that can go anywhere in the body to be utilized, but what's in the muscle is only used in the muscle where it sits. So that equates to about 1,600 to 3,000 calories. So if you're going to be burning more than that, obviously, then you'll start to use other fuels, which include what you're taking on board, or it then might be turning to fat burning. But you don't want to deplete yourself more than that. and not refuel. So if you're going to do something more than a couple of hours, of course, you're going to have to take on more carbs to replenish that glycogen store. So it makes sense that you go into an event already replenished, already stored up. But how do we do that? The things that you need to be cautious of are carbohydrate loading with things that are going to affect your digestion. Yeah, so firstly, a little mini recap. We're going to carb load if we're doing something that's over 2 hours. You're going to carb load if you're going to do something that's endurance. So something that's sort of 60 to 90 minutes, you're not going to need to carb load for at all. If you're hard racing, 90 minutes to 2 hours, you might need to a bit, but generally over 2 hours, it's recommended. So something like, for some people, they're going to do a half marathon in an hour and a half or even less. You wouldn't need to worry. But for those people that are going to take longer, they're going to get more fatigued. They would need to carb load. Anything over the 2 hours, long distance, your ultra, when we did coast to coast in a day, we should have been carb loading for things like that. Then looking at how much carbohydrate we need. So the sort of ballpark figure is between 8 and 12 grams. So 10 is a good figure because it's easy to do the maths. So roughly 10 grams of carbohydrate per kilo body weight. So if you weigh 70 kilos, you're looking about 700 grams. And that's what you're going to be consuming in the 36 to 48 hours towards that competition. That's actually quite difficult. So for some people it's not. But if you're carb counting, you probably know quite well how many carbs you have in a day. And you know that when you have those big meals, so you know when you have your meal that's, say, 100 grams plus, how difficult it is sometimes to get the insulin balanced with that. It's just a bigger load, it's harder for the insulin to work. So that can be quite a big challenge. So the easiest way to do it with type 1 is not only to have your 3 meals a day, but break it into lots of little snacks. So, do meal snack throughout the day, and also drinks as well. So you can carb load by, milky drinks, milkshakes, fruit drinks, smoothies. So things that are easy to consume. Oh, is that Alistair? Sorry, I can't hear you.
I think it was David. That's right, I muted him.
Oh, okay. So things like white rice, your white pasta, you don't want to go high in fibre. You don't want granary bread or seeded stuff that's going to sit around your gut, digest slowly. You want things that will digest quickly. So white bread. So white bread and honey is good, bagels and honey. Breakfast cereals, but don't go for shreddies or, things, shredded wheat, things that need a lot of digestion. Go for things that you'll digest a bit more quickly. Pancakes are good. You can load those up with more carbs. You can load them up with, sliced banana, honey, add extra carbs to things like that. Mashed potatoes, great. It's really easy to digest.
What about Ben and Jerry's ice cream?
Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that's Ben and Jenny's. That's my hypo coming back. Ben and Jerry's, that's good.
That's good.
Potatoes, sweet potatoes, bananas and grapes, melon that's easy to eat. Putting fruit sauces on things. Other snacks, crisps, pretzels, cereal bars, things like that. Things that aren't too fibrous with the cereal bars. So sort of rice cakey things that are covered in yogurt or the chocolate covered ones. And then you've got your sports foods, so you can have things like your maltodextrin, your energy chews, yogurts, rice puddings, jellies, sorbets. All those kind of things are really good for for your carb loading.
Just Wendy, I think I missed the bit where you were saying. So are you advising that carb loading should only be done for events over 2 hours?
Yes.
You said over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, for over 2 hours. And for some people, I would say that if you're regularly doing that and that's you're not getting fatigued, you might not need to carb load because you're trained better at doing that kind of thing. But for some people, that's going to be doing something nonstop for 2 hours is going to feel a lot more massive. So it's all quite relative, but generally speaking, you're not going to need to carb load for something that's under 2 hours. And this is about performance as well. I mean, you might be, I mean, like my typical Sunday, I might be in my garden for 6 hours. I'm not going to carb load on a Saturday because I can come in and eat when I want. That's not it. It's about the performance. So this isn't about the eating during the activity. This is leading up to it, making sure that your stores are ready so that you're not just going to hit that wall early on an event. So it's about performance. It's not just about the nutrition generally for being active, if that makes sense. So yeah, so
Can I
48, yeah,
can I ask a question?
yeah.
So I know you sort of covered this before, but how much like you've got carb loading and you've got fueling during the event.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess that what I was saying, like, how necessary is it to carb load?
So you don't want to start an event fatigued. So
Yes.
if you think, so your carb store, we've just said the glycogen stores, you've probably got like the 500 to 600
Yeah.
in your muscle, about 100 in your liver. So if you're managing to consume your 60 grams an hour, you're not going to replete that, are you? So what you're having per hour is you're topping up, keeping your glycogen stores topped up. But if you haven't been eating well into an event, then what you're eating in those hours, you're just topping up what you're depleted in, if that makes sense. So you want to
So,
start.
so you couldn't say, okay, well then, therefore I'm going to take 90 grams. So, like, so because I'm sort of a bit scared about taking, I did do one carb loading episode. I think I took 3 times more insulin than I normally take.
So that's fine. Taking 3 times the amount of insulin with 3 times the amount of food is absolutely spot on. What is difficult with type 1 is the quantity at one time. So from my dinner normally is, say, 60 grams of carbs. That's a typical dinner for me. So if I then ate 120, obviously I'll be taking twice the insulin, but my body isn't used to having that much dinner and my gut would struggle. So what I would do if I was carb loading is I would, have my dinner, maybe a couple of hours later have a pudding, then I'd have a bedtime snack. So I would still have those carbs, but I would have it as early evening dinner, say 5 o'clock, then I'd have a 7 o'clock snack, then I'd have a 9 o'clock, and I would space it like that so that I could then dose my insulin, see what my blood glucose is doing, and just manage it much better. Does that make sense? Rather than that big load. And then we all know how the graph goes, that you've got 120 grams of carbs, you bolus 120, the insulin all starts working before you've digested it, you have a hypo, then you go high, and it can be difficult. So in type 1 it's much easier to carb load, breaking down into lots of smaller amounts, meals and snacks, drinks as well, rather than just trying to, wallow through a massive plate of pasta that the insulin is going to work too quick for, and you're going to struggle. Equally, you might not take enough insulin because you're thinking, I've got an event tomorrow, don't want to be hypo tonight, I'll be cautious. And then you're high and your poor muscles are not getting that glycogen into them because you've got nothing to push it in there. You haven't got the insulin to push it into the muscles. So, it can be tricky. So manageable amounts, but still the same guidelines. So the guidelines are exactly the same as someone without type 1 diabetes, but you need to think about how you're going to do it as a strategy so that you're not, making sure that you're taking too much insulin at one time. It's going to then drop you, as we know can often happen.
Can I ask whether it's different if you're on a pump or injecting separately?
Same. Yeah,
same.
It's the
Thank
same.
you.
The other thing, just to be cautious of.
Richie's got his hand up. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Richie.
No, I was just to say. So, I thought it was 1 gram per 1 kilogram of body weight if you're eating the morning of an event. So, like for
That's
example,
on the morning. So I haven't got that far yet. So I'm talking leading up. So,
okay, fine.
48 hours, you're increasing the carb intake. So the 48, 24 hours, and that's when you're having that sort of 8 to 12. So just pick 10 in the middle is a good number. It's easy to fit, to think about. That's what you're looking in the last sort of 36, 48 up to 24 sort of hour period. On the morning, you're 1 to 4. So if you're 70 kilos, you have a 70-gram breakfast. Some people might need more. So again, if you can have more, I wouldn't have that much and run, because that's difficult in your stomach. But if you're on a bike, you might manage more because you might just feel a bit more comfortable. Depends what activity that you're doing. You'll know your sport best, but at least the 1 gram. And those of us that went to Liverpool and did the studies, we were all weighed in the morning, and then we had to eat the breakfast that was equivalent to 10 grams of carbs. So, you know, if whatever you weighed, you had to eat 1 gram. So if you were 60 kilos, you had to eat 60 grams for breakfast of carbohydrate, and that's what we had to eat. So that's what you're going to have in the 1 to 4 hours before starting an event. So you've already carb loaded in the few days leading up for them, and then you just have that breakfast. And for most people, having 1 gram a kilo body weight isn't too much, but up to, you know, the 4 times is what you'd recommend. So it might be that you might have your normal breakfast, but if you can get away with drizzling a little bit of honey on it, or you know, something that's going to add a little bit of extra carbs, then that can be quite helpful as well.
What time?
Sorry, Wendy, I just had a question as well.
Yeah.
I don't know again if it's like that sort of category, like if I've understood carb loading correctly, but is there a role for carb loading when you're maybe, instead of doing like one long event, as you said, over 2 hours, what if you're doing, you know, a particularly, you know, intensive like training block where you're doing more hours than you usually would do, sustained for, you know, many weeks, say? Like, is there a role for carb loading, and or is that just not, that's not
So
really carb loading, that's just
so then you're looking at your targets. So there's a document that we use in sports nutrition. It's the American College of Sports Medicine, and they're the guidelines that we use. So if you're sedentary, you might be having 3 grams of carbs per kilo body weight, up to 5, and then if you're starting to exercise 1 to 2 hours a day, it's 5 to 7 grams, and it just basically builds on that. So you would be using your general sports nutrition guidelines. So if you were doing 4 hours of exercise every day, you'd be at that higher end anyway. You'd be having your 7 to 10 grams carbohydrate plus a day anyway, per kilo body weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but is that classed as carb loading, or is that just increasing your overall intake?
So it's not. So carb loading is specifically when you go from a lower amount to a higher amount in preparation for an event. So it's not carb loading. It's just matching the carbs with your activity. Because
the reason why I say this is because when I was training for my marathon last year, and I was just doing a lot of volume in the week, I just remember I was just struggling all the time. I felt, I'm sure, back at that time, I'm sure I must have just depleted all of my glycogen stores quite persistently, sort of, you know, I just felt like I had no reserve, and it's like I would be doing literally nothing, and I would be sort of easily hypoing at work and taking in more, and the slightest little thing I felt that was just tipping me into hypo all the time in that. So from a science point, I'm sure it was probably just because I've just depleted all my stores, and I probably just wasn't.
That would be happening. So the first is you might not be eating enough, and you can look at your body weight, work out what you know, what amounts you should have been having. And you know, if you were having 3 grams per kilo body weight, or even up to 5, that's not enough. You would be, you know, expecting to have a lot more per kilo body weight. So yeah, you might need
is that in a 24 hour period?
Yeah, probably 12 hours if, you know, you're counting sleep. But the other thing that you're doing, George, is that you're becoming really insulin sensitive. So the hypoing isn't just about what you're taking in, and that's why it's really confusing for us with diabetes, because we hypo and hit the wall or experience bonking, nothing to do with our glycogen stores. It's to do with we've taken too much insulin for what we've eaten. Doesn't mean we're depleted in our glycogen stores. It means that our bloodstream, we've dropped it too much because we've obviously taken too much insulin, and so that adds confusion. So I think the best thing you can do is just work with the numbers. You can't work so well with the feelings, because the feelings will very much be clouded by what your blood glucose is doing. So another thing just to sort of be aware of with type 1 and tapering. So the idea of tapering is obviously as you're carb loading, you're making sure that you're not using up all those glycogen stores that you're that you're building. And obviously you don't want to get injured, you don't want to be fatigued. It makes sense that there's no point running miles and miles the day before a marathon. That's common sense. But if you sit around doing absolutely nothing, then actually you're changing your insulin sensitivity coming into an event, and that's not how you've trained. So you might find that you're becoming less insulin sensitive into an event, and actually you've trained with that insulin sensitivity with the fuel that you've been taking on, and it's more likely to make you run high. So the guidance is generally still keep active. So don't just think, oh, I'm tapering and sit on the couch and stuff carbs. Keep moving. It doesn't mean that you're going to go running or you're going to go out on your bike if that's what you're training for, but don't just sit around the house. Don't do anything that's going to make you have an injury. Don't do anything that's exhausting, that's going to deplete your glycogen stores, but keep on the go. So it might be that you go for a casual walk, you do gentle things that just keep your insulin sensitivity. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool. Brilliant. I was just looking as I've been hypo whether there's anything.
Do you think I know you probably don't know the answer to this question, Wendy, but do you think there is any science in, for example, like when you're exercising and you do have a hypo, right? And you continue to exercise through it, almost like you would come out the other side of bonking. Do you think do you think that does anything physiologically to your body and the way you can adapt to bonking, like an actual bonk?
I'm not really sure what you're saying. So, I mean, if you haven't got enough fuel and you're fatigued, you're at risk of injuring yourself. You're at risk of having an accident. So I think the thing to think about, it depends where you are in an event. So say you've got, I don't know, a mile left to go and you're all out and you've got nothing left. You just go for it, don't you? You're not going to suddenly start taking on gels unless you're type 1 and you're hypo. You're going to sort of deal with that. But generally speaking, you're going to go for it towards the end of an event, whatever. But if you're, say you're halfway through and you've got the whole, rest of an event to get through, it's not just physically, it's mentally. And mentally you're more likely to give up, or you're going to be confused. And if you're on your bike, you're more likely to have a crash because your reaction time is going to be poor. You're more likely to trip. If you're running, your gait. So if you're getting fatigued, your gait will alter, and then you'll lose your running form. So you're more likely to injure yourself, as well as getting fatigued. So it's not just about pushing through tiredness, it's about actually injuring yourself as well, I would say.
Yeah, I probably didn't ask the question very well. What I was trying to get at was like, for example, on Sunday I went out for a run, and within the first mile I had a hypo.
Right, okay.
So 1 mile in, just had my breakfast, 15, 20 minutes ago, plenty of carbs and ball, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Felt absolutely terrible, obviously, I'd probably say for the first 5 miles.
Yeah.
Carried on, obviously had a gel, blah, blah, eventually started to feel a bit better. That was after like 80 grams of carbs. And you come out the other side and then obviously you feel better, but I didn't know if there was something about that sort of experience that normal people wouldn't go through. I don't know if I'm
I know what you're saying now. So you're saying, as someone without type 1 diabetes, when they have the bonk or hit the wall, it's quite extreme for them, and they might not cope with it quite as well as us, because we deal with it every day.
Exactly.
So every single day. So I think you're quite right. I've not got any evidence for that. I've got no papers or anything scientific that I've read to back that up. But just generally, we have that resilience. I mean, we all have to do things when we're hypo, don't we? And we just get on with it. So it might be that, I mean, the amount of times I've ridden home from work and my blood glucose has been in the 2s and it's been raining, I'm like, I'm not going to stop. I know my blood glucose is 2.8, but I will get home by the time it's 2.6 and I will be fine. And you just manage to stay on that bike. Whereas I reckon someone that had, yeah, that was just bonking, wouldn't manage to do that
No.
because you've done it so many times. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that I think we have a lot of experience in pushing through physically when we haven't got that glucose on board. But yeah, that's almost like a separate thing. But yeah, so the key takeaways are carbohydrate loading is helpful. And if you're doing something where, you know, you want to perform, you don't want to be struggling with, you know, the fatigue and the lack of performance, then, you know, it's something to do before an event. But think about it a few days in, think about it alongside your tapering, think about it alongside how your gut's going to cope with those foods and how you're going to balance your insulin. If you're suddenly going to up your carbs, how are you going to, you know, dose your insulin to match that? For some people, it means upping their basal as well, which, you know, can be tricky because then on the day of an event, you don't necessarily want more basal. So, you know, it's easier to eat frequently and just keep bolusing than messing around with basal. If you're on pens, it's not really possible. But if you're on a pump, you can.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Does it, you sort of slightly hinted at, does carb loading actually change then typically the response that you do during a race? So how much insulin you would normally, you know, when you're training, you don't carb load, and then you've got a race, so you then carb load, and then
Oh, you've gone. Sorry, David, I can't hear you. Do you want to put something in the chat?
right.
Ruby has got her hand up. Let's go over to Ruby.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ruby.
Hello. So it's my first time joining you, so hello.
Lovely. Nice to have you joining.
So I do high rocks races. Don't
Yeah.
judge. So they are normally sub 90. But I have tried, so I'm coming up to my third one in October. So my first one, I just did carb loading the night before.
Yeah.
Which didn't go great. And then the second one, which was in March, I tried the tapering, but I had exactly what you were saying, that it just kind of was increasing. And then it got to race day and my numbers were kind of all over the place because I hadn't trained on that sensitivity. I trained on a different sensitivity.
Yeah.
Even though it's sub 90, do you think there's still a place for the carb loading? So I'm now thinking maybe I change my entire tactic in October. Don't carb load, just have my normal breakfast and just go for it and see what happens.
So I think apart from how your gut feels, there's no harm in the carb loading as long as it's not affecting your insulin sensitivity. Does that make sense? So if you can take in an amount that isn't so, I mean, like you say, it's sub 90, but it's highly intense, isn't it? That's the thing. So, and actually, because it uses a lot of coordination and it uses strength as well as, you know, stamina, and it uses everything really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I would say take on as much as you're able, not to feel, you know, you don't want to get up and, you know, feel that your gut's disturbed by the amount of carbs that you've taken on. And at the same time, you don't want it to be so much that it has affected your, you know, the amount of insulin that you've taken and, you know, it's sent you high and all over the place. So I guess you've got to try and experiment a bit, which is hard to do because training is never like competition. But I always say learn from mistakes. And so whatever you record, everything you do, and I'd say that to everyone, record what you've done, what goes well, what doesn't go well. And if you carb loaded before and you found that too much, how much did you take? Then bring it back from that, do a bit less than that. But the most important thing is that, you know, the day before an event, you're not, you know, say particularly if you're traveling or you know, you're staying in a hotel, you haven't got cooking facilities. So I mean, we've all done this. The night before we did coast to coast in a day, we had, you know, traffic trouble, and by the time we got to where we were going, everything was shut and the only thing open was a chip shop. So, you know, we were just confined to having a plate of chips when if we'd have been in our own accommodation, we would have cooked a meal that was a bit different. So sometimes the constraints aren't things that you can change. But if you were traveling the day before an event, it might be as simple as getting someone else to drive so you can eat in the car and things like that. Because if you're driving, you're not going to be eating enough. So yeah, it depends on the situation, but see what you did last time and, you know, base it around what went wrong, what could you do differently.
And then this might be a different question for a different day, a different topic. But I do find that sort of mid-race, the cortisol goes mad. And they kind of say sort of mid-race you want to be having a gel, but sometimes mid-race I'm like a 12, a 14.
So you do need insulin. That's the thing. Yeah, I think this is the hardest thing, and I've made this mistake. Some of you might have heard of Mike Riddell. He's a physiologist, very well-known Canadian physiologist, writes a lot of books, quite well-known in diabetes academia. And I was lucky enough to meet him at a conference, and you know, he sat with me and went through one of my strategies for open water swimming. And you know, I was saying to him, every time I go out in the water, I'm, you know, really high blood glucose because I don't want to be out in the sea going low. And he said, you've got to have the confidence to get yourself back into a range and just take something on, because you're going to, I mean, I've done a swimming event where everyone overtook me, people that I'm normally quicker than, because my blood glucose went to 90. I took my pump off, put it in transition, blood glucose went high, had a wetsuit on, couldn't give myself any insulin, and with a blood glucose of 19, it was like I was actually swimming through treacle. So you're going to be at the same situation. You're going to be in your high rocks trying to do your activity, and your blood glucose is 12, so that sugar that's in your bloodstream isn't going anywhere, it's just in your bloodstream, it's not fueling you. So to make sure that you're fueling yourself, you need to take the insulin and take a gel. So, and that's really hard to do. And I know it, I don't always do it myself because, you know, there's also, you know, I think there's a tendency to be fearful of taking on that many carbs and calories, particularly if you've been, you know, if you're a certain age, you've got a menopause belly, or you've been watching your weight or whatever it might be, and you think, I don't want to put on all that weight. It is really difficult, isn't it, to kind of get that balance right. So but if it comes down to an actual event day and you know you're going to get fatigued, if your high rocks is, say it was 90 minutes, then I would be fueling during that. So the what you've eaten beforehand can count towards the first hour, but then beyond you're going to have to take something on. So yeah, taking a gel at half point for that is really sensible, but you might need some insulin with it.
Yeah, because I've been upping my basal because I'm on pens. Basal for race day anyway, just because of the stress, just to have it all a bit.
All the adrenaline and everything.
But I've just done the Levemir Lantus switch, so I'm all over the place. So goodness knows what's going on. But yeah, no, good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it might be just you need, you know, and I would say cautiously bolus. So say for example, a gel is 40 grams of carbs and you're 1 to 10, so that would normally be 4 units. You wouldn't take 4 units for that during an event. You might not even take 2 units, you might not even halve it. You might just think, oh, I'll just put in 1 unit to help it's on its way, and you'll have to experiment with that. But
no,
yeah,
that's helpful. Thank you.
It is a real challenge, and you know, there is so much that we have to think about and that our bodies are going through just to do what normal people are doing. So all of us that are doing our sport or competing in any, you know, field whatsoever, we are amazing. Are there any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, Wendy, I've just got one more question. So basically, I did a 10 miler on Saturday, and I left it on auto, and I didn't need any gels, and my levels were fine when I finished the run.
So how long did that take you though? 10K is not 2 hours.
No, 10 miles. 10 miles.
Oh, 10 miles. How long does that take you?
So I left at like 8. I left at 10 to 9, and I got back at like 10:15. So basically, I was out for a long time, and I didn't take any gels. But my worry is when I did a marathon, I'm gonna need more gels because of the energy, give myself energy levels. But I'll just go high, and I don't want to keep pressing the buttons on the controller when I'm running because I can't. It's dangerous. Firstly, it's dangerous because I can't press the buttons, and I can't even see the control because it's so dark. So the screen's so light, so I can't even see it in the sun.
So
how,
are you
how,
on activity mode or are you?
yeah, I always leave it on
So
activity.
I wouldn't
No. I'm on auto. I don't
Oh,
put. I
sorry,
don't bother. I
automated.
don't. I
Right,
don't bother
okay.
with activity. It's a waste of time.
Can
I
you
always
set
go
temp
high.
basil
So
in
can you-
on
yeah.
pod 5, Wendy?
Only so you can, what I would suggest, and Richie, I think you've got to remember that on these calls we're not allowed to give medical advice.
I know.
And if you were my patient, I would be in manual mode and putting on it. So yeah, you're right, Andrew. You have to, in automated, just go with the algorithm. But if you're in manual mode, then you can
Yeah.
put on a temp basil. So you might need to
Yeah.
experiment with that. You know, I could tell you exactly what to do.
So that you can have enough carbs in the gels to give yourselves energy for the run.
You need to know that your preset basals are correct. And the thing with Omnipod 5 is that when it's set up, you'd have your basals preset. Because I work with children, when children come to clinic, every 3 months, we make sure that their preset basals are correct, because obviously kids are growing. So we adjust their preset basals every 3 months. I doubt anyone's changing your basals that frequently.
No, I've had it tweaked once, but
so you need
I don't
to
know how
make
to know.
sure
I don't know how to know if it's right or not. My basal.
it's doing your fasting is the only way. But also you can look at what your pump algorithm normally delivers you. So you can look on Gluco and see what it normally delivers you, and what it normally delivers you. You can just make sure that your preset basals at least match that, and then you can alter your put temporary basals on.
So what you're saying is for like a marathon, you could put potentially like say plus 10% 10 basal for the whole race
in manual mode, just so that you can eat
in manual
enough.
mode, and then have the gels to keep you going for the energy for the race.
You need to practice it. You can't just turn up on marathon day.
I know.
The other thing that some people do is just carry an insulin pen, just give themselves a bolus, like half a unit or whatever.
Would it slosh around though if it's in your bag when you're running? Would it just go? It would sort of bubble up, wouldn't it? The insulin there, or is it okay?
Fine. No, it'll be fine.
Okay,
you still need to do your air shot. You need to do your air shot every time you bolus, don't you? So but
you'd have to stop running when you're still that. Okay, yeah.
I think 10 basil will be your key.
I think 10 basil is the way to go. But Richie, just bear in mind, you need to find that way for yourself and experiment with that. I'm not, if I told you that you've got to go into manual mode and your manual basals are all wrong, that's really not helpful. So if that's what you want to do, I would contact your team and say, I want to use manual mode for sport. Can you check my or help me check my manual basals, so that you can then know that if you're doing a 10% extra, 20% extra, that is based on what you normally need. Sure. That would be the way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, any other questions? Amazing. So guys, what do you want me to do next month? What would you like? What topic? So we've done zinc. No, we haven't done zinc. We've done iron. We've done recovery. We've done... What do we do? I've lost it now. Did we do calcium and vitamin D? We haven't. We did. Bones.
Something you did.
I need to check back through what we've covered.
Healthy hypo treatment.
Healthy hypo treatment. Well, we've got raisins.
Is anyone else on here on Creon and how they digest food?
I don't know, and no one's mentioned to me, Ian, that they're on Creon. Do you
No,
need
that's fine. I'm on,
advice?
And I have to take like 7 or 8 pills every meal I take, which obviously is probably a lot different to anybody else on here. So
so do you have a dietitian that tells you how much Creon you need? Like,
they just tell me you got to do what you got to do.
But do you do like are you on the 10,000 or 25,000? 25. So has anyone said like you take one of those per so much fat? Normally
basically I'm prescribed 6 or 7 per meal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
But that's fine. I'm probably different to a lot of people on here. So
and do you adjust that if it's a high fat meal or like you wouldn't have the same Creon if you had salad and tuna as you would.
No, you have to alter.
Cheese, so
you do alter it, and
that's what I'm saying.
It is quite different, and it probably is different to a lot of people here. So
I mean, if we're talking about our carbs in particular, you're not taking Creon for carbs unless there's fat with it. So for things like if we're looking at carb loading for an event and you're doing rice cakes and honey and stuff like that, you're not upping your Creon for foods like that. Or
no, I'm taking it on like how I consume the food.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So it shouldn't, I know it's another burden for you, but it shouldn't really affect your sports nutrition, because with sports nutrition, generally you're keeping your fat the same. So as a man, you're having about 95 grams.
I'm very, very careful about my diet.
Yeah.
Because of what we've just talked about.
Yeah. So your fat will stay the same and you'll manipulate your protein and carbs.
Yes.
So from a Creon point of view, you're not really making any changes. You're leaving it as the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, sorry. Yep.
Cool. That's all right. Good. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll have a think about next month what we might do. Quite often I'll just look through the chat and see what topics have been. If anyone has any anything that you think sports nutrition-y that you would like me to look at, if I know all about it, I can do it. If I don't, I'll research something for you. So yeah, just tell me what you'd like, and yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it as always.
That's all right.
Cheers, everyone.
That's all right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.